What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is to try and put some words on Starfield and how I found it and what my overall thoughts are, and generally give you guys a review of how I found it. Obviously, I've taken my time with this. I didn't get an early copy or anything like that, so I finished the game now, got around 84 hours, or just under, and did all the factions, the main quests, a fair bit of side questing, pretty much 100% as far as achievements are concerned, with a little bit of base building thrown in and some shipbuilding as well. I have some thoughts on probably why this game is a bit divisive, and we're going to go through that now. Remember to give the video a thumbs up, drop a comment below letting me know what you think, and please consider subscribing. Right, so this is Todd Howard's masterpiece, his magnum opus as it were, and probably, as he admitted himself in one of the pre-launch interviews, his penultimate game with Elder Scrolls 6, most likely being the last one he would work on. I want to start with going over the different areas with Starfield, and what they get right and wrong in these, so these things like the story, gameplay, mechanics, etc. As a heads up, I will discuss the story and plot, but this will be time-stamped and time-coded in the video, so you'll have plenty of time to click off or skip if you do not want to be spoiled. Everything else will be spoiler-free as much as possible. So is this a space sim? No. I think if you come into this expecting No Man's Sky or Elite Dangerous but with more story, then you'll be disappointed. I think this could be a nice jumping off platform for entering into space sims, but I think the lack of the option to travel quickly to the planet's surface and take off, as well as loading screen after loading screen, does break the immersion in that aspect, even if the loading screens are really quick. I just feel like there's still that kind of immersion breaking going into the menus. That said, as someone here for the story, I think that fast travel is a godsend, and the amount of time we're hopping around from one system to another, the fast travel system, especially with the quick loading times, at least for me, mean it's a breeze going around and completing quests and visiting new planets. If I was to guess, my average time spent on a planet on No Man's Sky is probably 5, 6, 7 times as long as my time on a planet on Starfield. That's good and bad. I found the exploration to be a bit dull in Starfield. Points of interest like the random robotics labs or mining outposts were very cookie cutter. I felt there was a lot of repetition in there, 80 or so hours played. Even to the loot spawning in the same place and the same type of enemies, I did find there was a lot of repetition there. I expected more variation. And the scanning, even with it upgraded, I was just missing No Man's Sky when it came to cataloging my discoveries and finding new fauna and flora. I didn't enjoy that aspect of Starfield whatsoever. However, compared to No Man's Sky, and we will have a lot of comparisons to this review, you might be thinking this is also a No Man's Sky review at the same time, the stays on each planet are more meaningful in Starfield. I was helping out the local settlers, I was taking down a band of renegade pirates, I was finding out what happened to one of the townsfolk who wandered out of the city. The saving grace and high point for me in Starfield was the questing and the storytelling, and even the side quests, not even the faction quests, were really good, and certainly had some interesting ones in there, with multiple steps sometimes and choices as well. Don't get me wrong, the faction quests are brilliant, and I will be exploring that a little bit later in this review as well. Let's be honest though, the choice system in the game is rather binary most of the time, and you do get a fair warning of what will happen, like each outcome is kind of spelled out for you so you can weigh it up. This meant I played Starfield very much going from quest to quest, exploring the universe as a morally grey scoundrel on the path of redemption. The original plan of being a Han Solo smuggler type didn't really stick when the smuggling mechanic is kind of one-dimensional, and let's be honest, it's not very rewarding for the risk associated with it either. I feel it's a little bit half-baked. I would have loved to have seen a deeper system here where a smuggling ring could really be lucrative and a viable option. Compared this game to No Man's Sky a few times so far, but its closer other cousin would be Obsidian's The Outer Worlds, itself being influenced heavily by Fallout and being a space version of Bethesda's Great Legacies, so no surprise of the similarities when Bethesda made their own space version in Starfield. Obviously the scope of Starfield is way bigger, but the premise of fast travel from one planet to next, hub cities on some of the main key planets where the shops and quest givers are, given the straight on NPC dialogue camera, that's even similar compared to, you know, Fallout 4's more cinematic camera where it had for talking with NPCs. I found the combat to be some of Bethesda's strongest. The sheer creativity with the types of guns and weapons available, as well as how they feel and perform. I really enjoyed the gunplay, which is not something I would expect usually in these types of games. I found some absolute powerhouse weapons, which arguably trivialized the game for me towards the latter stages, but it was pretty fun still and definitely kicked in the space power fantasy. For the most part, the skills and perk levels nicely complemented combat as well, so you can spec in weapon types or adding extra effects to weapons, and the modding system in the game helped to fine-tune some of the weapons to just how you like them. If I had one gripe about combat, it would be the enemy variety. It usually would be pirates, mercs, robots, or the occasional alien animal or wildlife, you know. I didn't feel too much variety with the enemies, although plenty of ways to take them down with different weapons, so that's something at least. As for upgrading weapons, research, base building, shipbuilding, let's get into this, as this is arguably the area that was probably most disappointing for me, probably more so than the scanning and exploration. So research stations allow you to spend materials to unlock attachments, suit upgrades, and so on, which you can then upgrade at a weapon bench or a suit bench. But you also need the skill perk invested from leveling up to get the higher research tiers, so you can get the other kind of better mods and suit mods and stuff like that. The mods can only be replaced, so even if you found a weapon with a really cool mod on it, that system from Fallout 4 is gone. This is a step back. Fallout 4 had mods in the weapons that you could swap in and out, and it was just an overall friendlier system. That's something that's got left behind in Fallout 4. Base building for me was something I was quite keen to explore, and I was excited to dive into it. I think Todd says something along the lines that this is the best building system they've had. I cannot see how. You can't build individual walls or floors. The prefab only is a circle, square, or hexagon. Can do a lot of decorative like item placement, but you can't even make actual rooms within the prefabs themselves. It's just not that flexible. I found the building similar to Subnautica with base building rather than Fallout 4. And if you've played Subnautica, you'll have some idea what I mean there. Not that that's a knock on Subnautica, that's a brilliant game, but the building is very much prefab and a bit more simplistic. There's also no real base politics or management. You can't send trade routes from one settlement to the other. You cannot have trading posts or lots of villagers or, hiring like services and things like that. I'm comparing this again to Fallout 4, but you can have a handful of companions that you can place at outposts to increase output and stuff like that. You can set up cargo links to transfer resources from one to another, but it's just not the same depth. And I don't feel like this is anywhere near as good as what we had in Fallout 4. I feel this is ripe for DLC though, although I do feel it should be in the base game. I feel the building is just lacking in general. Shipbuilding, however, really fun. If a little frustrating at times, I wish I could rotate and freely build pieces much easier, and the parts available depend on the star yard you're at, and there's a fair few different manufacturers in the game. So it's a really cool system because there's a lot of variety. I just feel like there were some moments where I was just constricted with what I could actually do. I certainly felt this with the power. I always felt limited by the power reactor. You can only have one. The largest one I found was, I think, around 40 or so power, and by the time you've got the normal kind of ship stuff in there, you were at like 20, 24 already. You slap on a couple of weapons, next thing you know, you're maxed out on power. I found that super limiting. However, the actual creativity and design of just being able to make the ships, it's like Lego for spaceships, super fun to build, make all the different creations. You've seen loads of these different creations probably on TikTok and YouTube and all that sort of stuff as well. Really, really cool seeing what can be created in this builder. So moving on to visuals and audio, let's start with the soundtrack. Inonzer has created a masterpiece of work here. It's probably the highlight of the game, and it's some of the best video game audio and soundtracks I've listened to in probably the last decade. I think the score is up there with some Hans Zimmer compositions and just nails the sci-fi exploration, but also with that dirty 90s NASA punk vibes where the game is going for art style wise. It just really fits well, and despite a lot of the game being procedurally generated, the audio cues popped in nicely and not really awkwardly out of time or anything like that. It just fit really well and elevated the experience whenever it was present. It knows when to be loud and bold as well as quiet and reflective. Sound effects generally very good and fit the old aesthetic, and the voice acting generally was very good as well. I found if there was any issues, it was due to the script and or my hate for certain characters, but the voice work itself couldn't really be faulted. Visuals wise, from an art direction, I love the old sci-fi feel. The NASA punk, as they call it, and I very much enjoyed the touches of that splattered across the universe in Starfield. The game doesn't look too bad either. Lighting and details can look really nice at times and can shine. I'm playing on an i9 13900K with an RTX 4090, so this is a top-end PC and it was running 4K 100 pretty steadily. Some drops to 60 or 70 at times, but I found after the first patch my frames had improved, so it was a pretty smooth experience. I installed it on an NvMe drive, so the game loaded really quickly, which is helpful given the amount of loading screens you see. Thankfully for me, they were just a second here and there, so you get to where you need to be really, really quickly. Character models do have that Bethesda uncanny valley look, the soulless stare as it were. The weird animations when people run or jump. There's some things that I struggle to overlook for sure, but I found it pretty good when it came to pop in and space combat, or as you're clearing out buildings of enemies and the bodies pile up. The creation engine was handling a lot of the items and variables rendered really, really well. And overall, I was happy with how the game looked. I don't think it would win an award for best looking game, but it's certainly not a bad looking game at all. I'm going to go on to spoiler territory here now. As we discuss the plot and faction quests and go through those, I'll put a timestamp on the screen now for you to skip along to if you do not want to be spoiled. But those that are happy to stay and watch this bit will just wait a little bit before we jump in. Time should be on the screen now. Okay, we all good? Let's go. I heard a lot of rumblings that the main story was disappointing, and I was trying to cast my mind back to Bethesda games when the main plot was amazing. I don't even think Skyrim's was that great, or Fallout 4's. I've always found the side quests in Oblivion, Fallout 3, Morrowind, etc. to be what really shines the light on the storytelling and the world building. Personally, I enjoyed the story, and my main criticisms will be two things. It starts very slowly, and later on there's a lot of repetition with very little variation. So let me explain that. You start as a miner on Vectera, new to the crew, and you're sent to dig up this artifact. When you touch that artifact, you see a vision and music and lights, and you wake up and you get to pick your character and build your character and all that stuff. You then meet Barrett, who just gives you his ship and robot and tells you to go to New Atlantis and give the artifact to Constellation, an explorers group who are collecting these things. You basically get recruited, and this tutorial phase does drag out for 1 to 2 hours depending on your pace. Your journey is basically going from one lead to another and finding more and more of these artifacts. Eventually you get warned off by the Starborn, and they say that we are not worthy of these artifacts, and they actually attack Constellation. At this point you have to make a choice to defend Constellation's home base or the satellite above the planet. Your 2 most loyal companions will be split between these 2 locations, and whichever one you don't go to will see the death of that companion. Found this a little on the nose, but I believe it can be any of Sarah, Samko, Barrett, or Andrea. Being an Andrea stan, I let Barrett die, and we had a little funeral, and after that there's not much said about it. A choice with a consequence, but maybe not that big of a deal. Anyway, after collecting some artifacts, we find out they can point us towards a structure. This turns out to be a temple, and we step into the temple, it turns into 0G, we do a little floating mini game, and then we get a power. This power can be used in combat, and we can unlock more powers as well. There's 24 temples, I believe, and you can equip them just like weapons and can be force push, invisibility, solar flame, etc. Quite a lot of variation here. You can now start to visit multiple temples and collect these various powers, although nothing changes. This is the repetitive bit I mentioned. This plays out the exact same time every time for all 24 times. No variety, no differences in puzzles or how they work. It starts to get a bit mundane. If anything, this game is lacking the dungeons with bosses and stuff like that at the end. Those are largely non-existent, and they don't really exist in the same way that they did in the previous games. We get invited aboard to meet the Starborn and find out that they are people we know, just different versions of them. One of them is a companion that died. In my case, it was Barrett, except he's not my Barrett. He's Barrett from a different universe, and in his universe, I died. So we start to get this multiverse thread that gets pulled, and it turns out that each Starborn is someone who has collected all the artifacts and has ascended into another universe and does it again and again. This is by traveling to somewhere called Unity, and they need all the artifacts in the universe put together into an armillary so they can travel there. They ask us to pick a side to help. One is considered good and evil with how they want the artifacts to be found or not, and you can choose neither as well, and that is actually the one that I chose. We go to NASA on Earth, which was a really cool touch, I thought, and we find out that Earth is destroyed because of the artifacts. In the lore, we found an artifact and we used that to make the grav drive technology, which is how we light speed jump around the galaxy in this universe, basically like the Mass Effect relays and light speed in Star Wars and stuff like that. We basically did that too much with the early tech and destroyed Earth's atmosphere, and it was cool that the story took the time to explore that bit of the lore as well. If you go to Earth in the game, it's just a dust bowl. There are some leftover like kind of landmarks and stuff that you can find, little Easter eggs here and there, but there's not so much in the way of too much explanation as to how that happened, and so this revelation was quite nice. I like that they took the time to do that. After we have enough artifacts, we get to meet both of the Starborn, and in our case we had to fight both of them as we sided with neither of them, but if you pick one, then you both fight the other, so it makes it a bit easier. When you've fought them at the end and get the final artifacts from them, you now have all the pieces and you can complete the armillary on your ship, and when you next grav jump, you will travel to Unity. At this point, you can then continue playing the game and doing whatever you want, or if you're happy and you've done everything you want to, you can then just grav jump and start that next step. I'd done all the other faction quests and everything before this point. I was happy with where I was in the game, and so I then just proceeded to travel to Unity once I had everything I needed. This was kind of like the wrap up, the last thing I was doing. So once you travel to Unity, this becomes the tapestry section where you get to review your choices in the game depending on how you handle certain events. This is why people said not to skip and rush to the end, and you might saw a lot of YouTube videos saying like why you shouldn't skip to New Game Plus and all that kind of stuff. It's basically because if you skip, this area is going to be empty or very light. It's not going to have all your choices and ramifications. All the faction quest outcomes will appear here depending on the choice you picked. Again, the choices aren't a massive thing here, but depending on what the choice you did pick is, there will be a corresponding kind of storyline that's like, oh, this is what happened in the wake of what happened in your quest kind of thing. Once you've had a little look around here, you then have the choice to turn around and continue in this universe and save, or you can proceed and ascend into Unity. This is the game's canonical New Game Plus. You keep your skill level, but everything else is lost. You ship all your items and everything, and you basically get to start again. But each time you New Game Plus, the universe can change. I've seen reports where Constellation is dead and only the robot Vasco remains. There's ones where it's kind of like a daycare and they're all children. There's ones where the character, where Constellation is just made up of different versions of your character, and it's just your player character walking around and stuff. I saw it's like a 6% chance or something for these universe variations to happen, so it's a cool idea. It gives a lot of like replayability and longevity. You don't have to do the main quest again either. You can choose to kind of either play along and do the quest again, or you can actually say like, yeah, like explain it all to them and say like, yeah, I'm Starborn, here's what the artifacts do, let's get to work and find them. And that's quite cool as well, because you can skip some of that early kind of, oh, what are the artifacts kind of thing. So it's quite nice to give that plot point a bit of thought there as well. In truth, personally, I feel it's cool with the New Game Plus. I just feel at this point I was done with what I wanted to do. I had a little explore in the New Game Plus, but there wasn't enough there beyond to really drag me in further, and I will elaborate more on that at the end of this review. So all in all, I found the main quest to be okay, nothing groundbreaking, but certainly not boring or rubbish. I was quite interested once it got off the ground and it started to develop a bit. It definitely did start a bit slower. As we started to unravel those mysteries a little bit more, I started to get more and more invested. Where the game really shines though, in my opinion, is the faction quests. The United Colonies quest line, you investigate the Terramorph attacks, these deadly alien creatures that terrorize human colonies. Freestar Collective is like Space Sheriff, where you look into a wider conspiracy and plot by one of the corporations. Crimson Fleet is where you can either go undercover or just become a full-blown pirate and either take down the pirates or take down the SysDef, which are like the authorities in space. Lastly, there's Ryujin, which acts like a stealth espionage thriller in the corporate world, and you start off as a coffee lackey to then become a full-on enforcer. These generally all shined at various points. I personally thought the UC questline was brilliant, and I liked Ryujin, but I felt it tailed off and failed to keep it going at the end. Overall, they're all very well told with fleshed out characters and politics. Choices as well, although like I said before, fairly warned and calculated choices where the game basically says if you choose A, then this will happen. If you choose B, this will happen. So there wasn't much left for you to find out down the line. Overall, I enjoyed the stories and main quests a lot, and I can definitely see DLC being added in the future for some other factions that were present, but notably had no quest line, like House Varun, for instance. Seems ripe for a DLC in my opinion. Right, so that's spoilers over, so let's get into some final criticisms I had of the game, and then the final thoughts. This game in many ways is a technical leap forward, but there are also a few things that were missing in this game that have been present in previous games from this developer. Things like swimming is rough at best and you can't go underwater. Cannot remove weapon mods, you can't command your companions to do anything specific or move anywhere. Shops just seem open 24/7, there's no schedules, and the shop credit inventory is horrendously low for the amount of loot you find. You just can't sell anything as no one has the credits to buy it all. So once you get a certain amount, you just start not bothering looting and picking up all the stuff, which is someone like me who loves looting and selling stuff in these games. It was not an enjoyable experience. You can't craft weapons, armor, ammo, and also when you loot enemies, like you take their armor, their body still has the armor on, like it doesn't change the model on the floor, which is disappointing, like into their underwear or whatever, like, or into their like just plain clothes under their spacesuit. They just still have the spacesuit on, but you've got the spacesuit in your inventory. Just little details like that. The gore has been toned down a lot in this game as well. There's no kill cams or stealth finishes. The sniping in this game is really good, and I was surprised this has been omitted because I felt like it was a perfect match to have those kind of stealth kill, kind of slow cams that you get like in Skyrim and Fallout. There's also no local map. You open a map in a city and it's just a blue topography with just a mixture of it's horrendous. The map is a joke. It's really poor. Hope that gets addressed in the future. That's definitely something that they've half-assed there. Like maybe they just didn't have enough time to do it. Maybe they didn't want the implications of having to procedurally generate maps if you open the map on a planet in a random area. I think at the bare minimum, the main city should have a map, and it's a shock to me that they don't. Like, yeah. Not good enough there at all. Speaking of maps, the areas you land on the planet are huge areas, bigger than some other games' world maps completely. And the memes of people running to the edge, you're just not naturally going to come across that. I just wanted to address that. However, I do think land vehicles or being able to tame and mount and ride animals would be an amazing addition, and I think the game's exploration is harmed by the lack of travel options on land. You also can't really have multiple active quests at once. You can turn on quest markers, but these work sporadically. I found them a bit buggy, and they kind of are meant to turn on for all quests in the nearby area, but they would only turn on for a couple, and there was no clear kind of indication why they would turn on for some and not for others. The alternative is you only have one chosen marker active at one time, and you can't have a couple added at the same time, so you could like tick off a list of quests that you got to do in the city, for instance. These are seemingly small little points, and there's many more that add up to Starfield being a brilliant but inconvenient game. Something that's sometimes a battle in itself, but rewards for persevering can sometimes be amazing. The game is ripe for modding and DLC, and I hope it gets the support in the future because this has a lot of really great potential. Many things do feel half done, or the idea is there but the execution is lacking, and that can get better with time. This is by no means a bad game, and I don't rate games on a numbers basis, but the 8 out of 10 I've been seeing here and there, and on Metacritic I think it's currently at 84. I think that's fair. This is a game you can easily spend 70 plus hours in and still find more stuff to do. Personally, beyond the factions and story and what I've already done, I probably won't continue playing this for the time being. There's many other games that I need to jump into and play, but we'll definitely be back for the DLC in the future, as well as any updates that interest me or tempt me back in. I might get that itch to go through a few New Game Plus playthroughs and see how those pan out as well. I think if you like Bethesda games, there's a high chance you will like Starfield. If you're here for a No Man's Sky experience, I don't think this game can ever provide that, as it just doesn't hold a candle to that in terms of exploration in my opinion. And that's not to say No Man's Sky is a better or worse game than Starfield, they are just different games. The great news is that this is on Game Pass, so you can try this super cheap or as part of your existing subscription without having to buy the whole game. But I would give it 4 or 5 hours. Settle in, push into the main quest a bit first. You may find it hooks you. I'd recommend it, and I think it's a great game, but it's just not the best game. It also unfortunately released shortly after Baldur's Gate 3, where the writing and voice acting there is superb, and arguably at times better, though it is a different game genre for sure. Starfield is story first, gameplay second, and I think it tells its stories well and has room to improve its gameplay for sure. Anyway, that's all from me. I hope you found this review helpful, and I wanted to take my time to get it right and explore the game to see what it has to offer. Please consider subscribing to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, it all helps with the algorithm, and let me know in the comments below if you found this useful or how you're finding Starfield at the moment. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.